Thank you. With us on this special edition where we're discussing all the measures being introduced by the Finance Minister in Budget 2017. This is a part of the discussion where we bring it down to taxation issues, the kind of changes that have been made in the budget. Let's discuss this. Joining us is Milind Kothari. He is Managing Partner at BDO India. Mr. Kothari, great to have you with us. At the outset, I just want to help gauge your perspective on how much you think this actually expands the tax base, as it were. With all the kind of measures that the finance minister is hoping to put into place, the idea is that India's tax base should go up without increasing tax rates. Now, how successful do you think that is going to be, considering what has been announced in the budget?
I think apart from the budget, I think the most important preface to this budget has been the demonetization initiative.
Yes.
And I think in light of the fact that government has now got the data of the number of people who have deposited cash, and you must have read yesterday, 18 lakh people have deposited cash in more than 2 lakh rupees, and that's a huge amount of data. Only 70% of them have PAN numbers in the first place.
Yes.
So I think if this is played out well over a period of years, and if you're able to discover a tax base that was not there on account of the demonetization drive, I think that's a big win.
Can you quantify that, Mr. Kothari? Do you think it can be substantial enough? Because I'm just trying to understand from what we have to what we could have, because we don't have the numbers yet from the RBI yet. So one is trying to understand how much more of the tax base can actually, the revenues side of it, because considering all the grandiose plans that are being laid out, you will need that kind of money at the government's disposal.
I think you mentioned right is that expanding tax base is the biggest challenge the FM has at this point of time. And I think with this data which would be available, this could be a game changer. The number of people who can be brought into the tax system, and that's something that has been always dodging government. People have raised questions, is that why cannot you have more taxpayers in the system? FM highlighted yesterday there are 1.2 crore cars sold in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
But actually the tax base is in fact shrinking in this period of time. So I think there's a lot needed to be done here. I think for once we have the data of people who have deposited cash, you have the visibility of who are these people. And I think that's going to be a big one that can make a big change over a period of time. Apart from dropping tax rates, if you increase the tax base, which is probably the most important initiative as a preface to this budget, I think I'm quite excited about this part.
Right.
Sure. Mr. Kothari, just to move the conversation to what's happening on the corporate front, I asked a previous guest this as well. How large a blow was the fact that there was the retention of the headline tax? And also, you've previously also written about how important it is for us to remain competitive and to also win investments. How do you think this whole interplay, or perhaps the letdown, how large is it?
I think I would say this is a disappointment, because it was in the offing that the tax rates would drop, and that's something that has not happened for the larger corporates. Of course, for MSME, the tax rate is dropped by 5%, but that's not saying enough. You're not giving a big message to the investor community at large in the world that India is ready to do business, and we have to compete globally. That's what even the FM said something as much as 15 days ago. That's not happened. I think that was a big dampener in my view. And the second, which I think is also not understood very well, is the restriction on interest deduction that will be there for borrowings from overseas for Indian companies. And I think that's going to be a big one as such, because this completely throws away the investment that we are trying to garner in the FDI.
Yes.
And this probably requires a restructuring of capital base for all these companies. I can't seem to think that's possible. You're looking at large investment in infrastructure, which is a long drawn out period of gestation, and interest outgoing as a deduction from taxable income was a very important part. I think these two effectively means that we still need to grapple with making ourselves competitive in the world.
That's what I wanted to ask you, because when you talk about the ease of doing business, at one level, we've got a dichotomous view coming in on the removal of the FIPB, and that's the proposal that has been made over there. But I'm just wondering whether this is going to be enough, because there is there's GAR, there is POEM, there is also ICDS. Keeping all this in mind, do you think the government is doing enough at this stage, or one should wait, because perhaps it need not be all out there in the budget?
I think there's a merit in to say that there's a weight that we should all have for the number of initiatives to be taken. And as you rightly pointed out, scrapping of FIP was something that was merited. 90% of the investment that's coming in the country is coming through the automatic route. We received $75 billion of FDI last year, which is quite remarkable for the level at which the economy is. Yes, of course, there's always something more we can do, and we'll keep on arguing about this, is that how much government should do. Of course, he's got his own compulsions. One of the reasons why the tax rates are not dropping as we would have expected is the GST introduction, which is around the corner, and the impact of that on the economy also need to be evaluated. I would go with the argument to say that I think waiting is probably more in the nature that we should.
No, but on that point of GST being around the corner, we are seeing some excise duty hikes as well. So did you find that a little odd that at this point in time, when you're looking at GST coming in, whether it's cigarette products, etc., we are still seeing those duty hikes come in? Does that surprise you?
No, I don't think that's much of a surprise, because this is something that's conventionally being done in terms of increasing the collection even before GST comes in. So I'm not reading too much into these small changes. I think the bigger picture awaits us with the GST introduction and the larger impact on the economy. I think that would probably be something we need to watch out for.
Absolutely.
Just a question to you, Mr. Kothari, while we're talking about GST, and we sort of have asked this, I guess, with our market guests as well, which is that are we already sort of pricing in the benefits of a GST? But, in terms of this whole larger goal of being a country which has simpler and more transparent tax mechanisms, is the GST really now the larger focus for all of us?
I suppose, yes. Of course, direct tax has been something that has taken much attention in this budget.
Yeah.
Indirect tax, not much to speak of course, except to say that we're waiting for GST. I think GST would be a game changer, and that I think we should wait for this outcome. And I think that's going to be very significant impact on the business community.
Now, dividend income, now that has been made taxable, and individuals obviously have to pay that. Now, tell me the expansion of the scope. Do you see that now happening across the board in terms of participation as well? When you talk about retail participation in the entire space, that has always been something that the government would hope to garner over a period of time. How much of this comes in the way, so to speak?
If you look at the overall tax rate that emanates from this level of taxation, if you look at promoter community, for example, we are looking at a tax rate of 54%, which is a very high rate of taxation. So I think somewhere we need to be able to simplify this. There are 3 levels of tax before the money reaches the hands of the promoters from the business that he generates. I think that's something we need to look at and optimize the tax rate so that we are fostering more investment and more entrepreneurship in our country.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, we just want to thank Mr. Kothari for having come in and given us his thoughts on the budget, as well as sort of his views when it comes to perhaps what could have been done differently. However, thank you very much for having joined us for this post-budget discussion. With that, it is a close on this special show on the budget of 2017. More news and updates will continue on the other side.
Bye-bye for now.